Is there more anti-Semitism that's come to public awareness in the last 4 months or so than you anticipated or realised?
Yes, for sure. I mean, if you had told me that there would be hundreds of thousands of people marching in solidarity with Hamas in various capitals, or that college campuses would become hotbeds of anti-Semitism, I would have found that shocking, even as cynical as I am about politics. So yes, I mean, the rise of anti-Semitism globally in the wake of October 7th is sort of a shocking thing, especially because, again, typically the response of the world in the wake of large-scale genocidal massacres. And when I say genocidal, I don't mean that an actual genocide was perpetrated. Hamas doesn't have the power to perpetrate an actual genocide. They would if they could. But in the wake of such massacres, typically, people tend to rally to the side of the people who have been massacred. In this particular case, again, there was an enormous backlash against Israel that began literally the day after. I mean, there were protesters taking to the streets against Israel before Israel even launched any retaliatory strikes in the Gaza Strip. And that I found absolutely disturbing. Also, again, I think that there is a certain conspiratorial mindset that has become quite common in the West. I see it more on the left than on the right, but there's certainly elements of it on the right that basically suggest that all of the structures of modern Western life are rigged, that the game is rigged. It's rigged based on hierarchical privilege, that the people at the top of that hierarchy privilege status are disproportionately white males, and that Jews are a subset of white males, and that you can actually tell who's the exploiter, who's the victimizer by amount of success in Western society. That is a deeply pernicious idea that tends to cross paths pretty easily with anti-Semitism.
You went with Elon Musk, as I mentioned, and he's had a pretty rough ride in the last couple of months after he tweeted, "You have said the actual truth," responding to a post that falsely claimed that Jewish people push hatred for white people. He's since apologised for that, and he went on this trip with you. But some people think he is anti-Semitic. I don't think he is, but what was your experience of travelling with him to Auschwitz?
Elon Musk is definitely not an anti-Semite. And for people who are sort of jumping on various Twitter comments to suggest that he is, I would suggest that you look at the full corpus of everything that he's had to say on anti-Semitism, on Israel, on what's going on in the world post-October 7th. It's very hard to come to that conclusion. You know, one of the things that I've said about Elon is that Elon is, he can be Trumpy in the way that he uses Twitter, that he sort of puts out whatever he's thinking in the moment, unedited. That's one of the benefits. It's one of the drawbacks. Very often, he will then come back and sort of fill out exactly what it is that he meant to say, which is what happened in the case of that particular tweet. That also means that he's considering things in real time, which is you've interviewed him, I believe, and interviewing him is really interesting that way. You'll actually ask him a question, and unlike most people who are asked interview questions, he actually sits and considers the actual question. He'll take it in. You'll see him actually shift his opinion in real time as he processes the question. It makes him a fascinating person.
Well, it's funny. I wasn't going to say this, but you've triggered me by saying you've interviewed him. I haven't interviewed him. I spent a year courting him to do an interview. He finally agreed to do an interview, actually, at the start of this year. I was 2 days away from getting on a plane from Los Angeles to Austin in Texas to do it with him. And at the last minute, he suddenly sent me, because he was doing all the organisation himself on direct message on X, he suddenly sent me a clip that someone had posted that day from an interview I did with Zuby at the start of December, in which I criticised Elon for bringing Alex Jones back to X, something he'd always said he wouldn't do. And he said that he'd lost all respect for me because I had said that, and the interview was summarily cancelled. So I never got the chance to interview him, which is a great regret because I think he's probably the most fascinating guy in the world right now. It also showed, you mentioned his Trumpian tweeting, a slightly thin skin. I was pretty surprised that someone who is such a defender of free speech was so thin-skinned about a criticism which actually a lot of people felt. He was right the first time about Jones, that Jones crossed a line that probably did warrant not being allowed back on the platform. So I'm afraid I haven't interviewed him, and that's why. So I've given you a little scoop there. But on that point that he was upset about, do you think Alex Jones should have been allowed back?
So my general belief is that Alex Jones should not have been banned from Twitter in the first place because he didn't actually violate on Twitter their terms of service. My belief is that you should actually have a consistently applied set of terms of service that really is less Cotty under the tree deciding who should be banned and who should not, because that gets into some really dicey areas. and living in fear on Twitter that you're going to cross an unspecified line at a certain point and find yourself on the outs, I don't think is particularly good. I've actually never called for anyone to be banned on Twitter, including many people who despise me, hate my guts, and probably would like to see me dead. So I actually don't even block people on Twitter, just on principle. I refuse to block people on Twitter. It's also why, for example, I don't delete old tweets that I disagree with, that I wrote in 2008, 2009, 2010. I leave those up for the public record. So I tend to be in favor of radical transparency on X.
Even if someone has had a $1 billion defamation case award against them for deliberately lying about families of kids who've been blown to pieces in their classrooms and hasn't paid a penny or a dime of that.
Oh, you are certainly not, Piers, you are certainly not going to get me to act in favor. Alex Jones and I do not get along. I think this is pretty clear publicly. I think that Alex Jones lies a lot. I think Alex Jones promotes conspiracy theories. I think that Alex Jones is a wild personality, and apparently in his divorce case, he claimed that many of the things that he says are for show. That's what Alex does. That's his shtick. But when it comes to would I ban him from a platform if I owned a platform, as opposed to, for example, owning a publication or being co-owner of a publication, which I am over at Daily Wire? I mean, I don't have to hire Alex Jones at Daily Wire to suggest that if you have an app that's like a town square, that even people I absolutely think are execrable should be allowed to be on there. One of the best things I think that Elon has brought to X is the community note system, which I would hope would be used when people promote lies on X.
I've actually agreed with pretty much everything Elon Musk has said and done. That's why him cancelling the interview was so painful. So perhaps given you're such big buddies, you could put a good word in for your old mate across the pond, could you?
I didn't realize I was going to be Elon's conduit in this interview, Piers.
I've got no other way in now. You're my last chance. No, because I actually do think he's a genius. And I think he's actually a force for good. I asked the question earlier, but if you look at everything he does, I do think he comes from a place of wanting to make the world a better place and not a worse place. And I think people like him should be encouraged.
I mean, I totally agree with that. I mean, the world requires audacious thinkers. Elon Musk is an audacious thinker. The world requires people who have high aspirations for humanity. Elon Musk has high aspirations for humanity. I think that the chief personality thing about Elon, having sat with him for a while, is that Elon is a person who likes to solve problems. And if the problem is in front of him, he really wants to expend all of his energy solving it, which is why he will literally go and sleep on the factory floor of new companies that he is working with or starting. He will jet set off to, I've never seen, I mean, the guy's the wealthiest guy on earth. He certainly doesn't have to go and sleep on the floor over a Tesla while he's redesigning their product, or have to go and sleep at the offices of X as he did when he first acquired Twitter. That is something that only a really dedicated person would do. And I think that is beyond argument. What Elon is trying to do, even when I disagree with him, is truly an audacious thing. He's a big thinker. It's a deeply American ideal. I mean, to be America-centric here, it's a deeply American ideal to shoot for the stars, and he's literally doing that. So I think that shouldn't be lost in all of the hubbub around whatever he's saying on X today.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And actually, you're the perfect person to put a good word in, because you and I locked horns in spectacular fashion at CNN, but here you are, like nothing happened.